joining me today, I'm absolutely thrilled and delighted to welcome Dr. Cathy Foley to join us. So Cathy has made many contributions to science and engineering and innovation in this country, from superconductor device development all the way through to quantum and so many other things. Most recently, and still currently for a little while longer, she is the chief scientist at CSIRO, but I'm very excited and thrilled to congratulate her publicly on the recent appointment announcement that she will be our chief scientist of Australia in the new year. So Cathy, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much, Sally Ann. I really appreciate those lovely introductory words. Looking forward to the forum today.
It's going to be great. And Monica Baroni. Monica has been the CEO of the City of Sydney since 2006. She has overseen the development and implementation of the city's long-term vision to be a thriving environment, a sustainable Sydney for 2030. And she is one of the most passionate people about community and connecting community and business and people to create something that is not just about place, and it's not just about space, but it is actually about the people thriving and contributing and solving the world's most pressing problems, but living in an environment that is sustaining and fulfilling them and nurturing them. And so I'm absolutely thrilled, Monica, to have you join us. We are delighted to have the City of Sydney again partner with us as our lead sponsor for Emerge Festival, and we just thank you for your continued contribution and commitment to actually building innovation in this city. Welcome.
Thank you, Sally Ann. Thank you very much for those generous words, and congratulations, Cathy. It's very exciting news.
Oh,
it is. So look, this is going to be a free-flowing conversation. We will take questions from the audience. So for those of you that are joining us online today live, feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A function, and I will try and get to them if I can. But I've actually got a lot of questions that I want to ask these incredible women. I know we were chatting a little bit before we went live about some of the possibilities for Australia and the possibilities for Sydney. And I think one of the things when we talk about deep tech is it's really hard for the general population to see it. Deep tech things in the life sciences, in health and well-being, you don't necessarily see it as a consumer. It could be the tests that are test facilities and the things that are used in diagnostics labs, which you benefit from, but you never see those companies or know where they come from. It could be people looking at waste treatment and sustainability in the city or at a national level, and you don't necessarily see it. So today we're going to get a chance to sort of talk about some of the things that both Monica and Cathy get to see and what gets them excited about the potential for Australia and the potential for all of us to engage. So let's start with that kickoff question. Clearly I'm passionate and I've not had 17 coffees. I'm actually just really excited to talk about what's going on here and what's happening across Australia. But let's talk about the status quo and what gets you excited and what you see as the greatest opportunities for Australia and for Sydney and the businesses and the deep tech companies, the science, the research, whatever it is. What gets you so excited and what do you see as the potential for the future? And Cathy, I'm going to throw to you first.
Okay. Wow, that's a big question, and there's so many things which you can be excited about, and there's so much potential. I think the first thing is that let's start at the basics, where we start with the research. We have some of the best universities in the world, and we have some of the best possibilities of turning that research into amazing opportunities in Australia. And like you, I love seeing great scientific breakthroughs, but I like even best, and what is I think quite seductive is the fact that it is so rewarding to be able to see research go from a laboratory and turn into something that makes a difference. But what we're seeing though is I think when I went to uni, the idea of an outcome was just publish a paper at the end and that was your job done. Now we've just opened up this Pandora's box of opportunity where I think people are coming in to work at universities, do research, but think that their next opportunity is to start up a business and instead of applying for a job, create their own. And I think the thing which I'm really enjoying seeing is all the policy settings that we're seeing, state governments, city councils like City of Sydney and federal government sort of all coming together, realizing that each part has a bit to play. And instead of everyone trying to do everything themselves, I'm getting a sense that there's a willingness to realize we have to come together and hold hands. And it's almost, I'm mixing my metaphors here, but, get that it's like we're playing, in a sort of relay, and it is a marathon relay, and we actually don't have to run the marathon ourselves. We can actually do it with everybody playing their bit, so we don't get all worn out. And I think that's something which, for me, it's a revelation, because we've never seen that before in Australia. I know we've sort of looked at Silicon Valley and places like that, but it's I sort of feel like Australia will hopefully, and particularly what's happening around Sydney, is going to leapfrog what's been happening in the past, and we're going to do it sort of post-COVID, new way, sort of a local way, which I think will be pretty special. So that's what's exciting me at the moment.
I love that. And I love the focus that you have on collaboration and the fact that you don't have to do it all. No organisation, no city council, no government department has to do it all. It is actually about coming together. I'm going to come back and drill into specifics in a minute. So I'd love you to think about, Kathy, some of the specific areas and maybe some of the stories you might be able to unpack for us of innovations you're seeing. But Monica, I want to pose the same question to you, because I know you really are looking in a lens particularly focused on the City of Sydney, which is quite large and diverse, and what's going on in the businesses there. What is getting you more and more excited about this space, and what is it that you're seeing as the potential and the opportunity for us in Australia and in Sydney?
So thank you. So firstly, obviously I'm a, city administrator. So my job is to enable a city that is, prosperous, fair, safe, and accessible, right? So when I turn my mind to that challenge, I've got to ask myself, what are the things that are going to enable that to happen? And clearly, understanding and investing in the sorts of things that you are doing, Sally-Anne, at Ithaca, or the universities are doing, is clearly going to be, we see as the opportunity and the future. So I'm just going to talk about 4 things that I think excite me, that are the opportunities that have really emerged, really, as Kathy has said, quite recently. People have really understood, and these sort of opportunities have emerged. One is that I think really, as a consequence of the bushfires in Australia, I think that finally, pretty much everyone now, including coalition politicians, are saying we have a climate emergency and we have to deal with resilience. So, clearly we are going to be so dependent on innovation and on technology to help us resolve that problem, those challenges. So I think the fact that we can now talk about these things much more openly and much more collaboratively is one of the opportunities. The second, and that is sort of related to this, is a growing awareness about Indigenous knowledge and how that can contribute to us solving some of those wicked problems. But I'm going to put a caveat on that and not talk about it now. It may come up later. That the caveat on that, of course, is the respect of and the resolving of the intellectual property rights associated with Indigenous knowledge. And I don't think we've even begun to have that conversation, although it's something that we're looking at here at the City of Sydney in terms of some policy work. The third, and this is really quite new in New South Wales, not for the City of Sydney, because of course the City of Sydney always looks through things through the lens of place. But I think the New South Wales government has now really embraced and understood that there are some aspects of the economy that can only occur and grow in place. Right now, that doesn't mean that everything happens in the place. And you talked about, I'm obviously I'm interested in what happens in the City of Sydney, but I'm interested in what happens in the City of Sydney for the prosperity of the City of Sydney. But I'm equally interested in the multiplier as a consequence of what happens in the City of Sydney. And I'm sure you've heard me say it many times, Sally-Anne, is that I want to know not just how many high-value jobs we can create in the City of Sydney, but how many high-value jobs they create beyond the boundaries of the City of Sydney. What is created here that then is manufactured or produced elsewhere? How can we help employ Australia? And that leads to my final point, which is, and this has also come at, I think, as a consequence of COVID, is finally we have, I think, understood as a nation that we have to reorient our economy. And we cannot afford to have everything, just outsourced. We have to really think about what are we already doing? What are we already creating that has the potential to take our economy to the next place and make it a much more sustainable economy that creates high value jobs, right? And so I think we know, and I know when I walk around Cicada or when I spend time at the universities, I see those exciting things that are going on, and I see that opportunity. And as Kathy has said, and we're starting to see government actually now create the policy that is about investing in that opportunity to take it to the next level. Thank you.
I love it. Thanks, Monica. So, I mean, riffing off that, I'm going to come back to you, Kathy, because I think when we unpack the things that you're talking about, that you're seeing, that you're getting excited about at Cicada and on universities, and these potentials for jobs and, this complex economy. Kathy, can you give us a story? Paint some flavor to that. What are the things that you get most excited about? Is it something in agriculture? Is it a particular thing in health? Is it something in quantum? What's the opportunities that you think are just things that we need to everyone needs to know about in Australia?
All right. Oh gosh, there's so many. Look. There's one which is a great story, I think, which is looking at that whole pull through of everybody playing their part. And I'm going to talk about V2 Foods now. And so that's so you might have seen the Hungry Jack's Rebel Burger, which is made with a synthetic. It's a plant-based protein that even Mr. Hungry Jack actually got it wrong when he had to do a taste test between the Rebel Burger and the Whopper or whatever it's called. You can see I don't eat them very often. So the thing was interesting was the researchers had developed this great way of turning plant-based protein into a meat substitute. They went and did the CSIRO ON program and found that through that, they were able to finesse what the business opportunity could be. Is there a market there or not? Then they were able to get support from Main Sequence Ventures, who realized that the people who were the inventors were definitely not the people who were the entrepreneurs to spin it out. And so that they helped to set up this company called V2 Foods, brought in their CEO, so that the researchers could still be researching and do what they do well. They were able to then let go and let some company form and take that and invest in it. They've got the venture capital from Main Sequence Ventures. And then they got, with that sort of support of the sort of business ecosystem, which is the sort of thing you have at Cicada Innovations, and be able to open up the world market. And so then you had Hungry Jack's coming on board and being a foundation customer. But the thing was important was they were able to do the scale up in a pilot factory, which we have in CSIRO, which allowed, it's sort of like a flexi fab line for food. They were able to pull that together and be able to do their first productions under proper, all the things that are needed for health and safety with food manufacture, and be able to deliver product into the market. Then we're able to attract all the investment so that they are now building their own factory, I think in Albury, and they're worth $145 million, and they've only been around for a very short, 2 years at the most. So that's the sort of growth that is possible, but you can sort of see that daisy chain of things that had to line up to make that happen. And it wasn't as though this was a flash in the pan or, the one in a million. This is actually something where it can happen over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that. It is that it can happen over and over again if we get the settings right and we bring the right groups of people together. And I see the noddings of the heads here, so I know I've got agreement. So Monica, I think you were touching on this earlier, but do you want to elaborate a little bit more? Because I think this is some of the work that you're trying to do in the city of Sydney of bringing those connections together. And I know, Kathy, you're doing this in the CSIRO, so please feel free to chime in as well. But, what are those things that we can do to replicate it, not just once, but replicate it, 10, 20, 40, 50 times, maybe, from each one of you? What's one thing that you think we collectively can do? And it could be government, it could be local government, it could be us, it could be, the venture capital industry. What are some of the things that you think we need to do to make that replication happen?
So something I often say, and although I have to say I'm much more encouraged by what I'm seeing from other levels of government more recently, but one of the things I often say is that because we are reluctant to enshrine things in policy, we start every project as though it's the first time we're doing something. Now, I'm mostly referring to urban renewal and those sorts of things, but because we won't enshrine things in policy, we start over every time. And obviously, for me, you know, enshrining certain sort of environmental standards in urban renewal is one of those examples. If it's just a given that you have to meet certain environmental standards, then it's not a technology problem knowing how to recycle water, how to how to put in decentralized energy, any of those sorts of things. These are not technology problems. These are policy problems. So that's the first thing I'll say. But I'm going to talk about a policy piece that we're working on at the moment that is about trying to enshrine some of these ideas in policy. And that is a policy piece of work that we're doing around community wealth building. And it is around creating a policy lens that's about, it's not about being protectionist, and I have to be careful because it's not about, that we want to do it here and keep it here. It's about investing in the right things so that the wealth is generated here, and the prosperity is shared here, but of course then creates the products that can then increase the wealth because they're the things that are exported. So it's about having the right lens over how you prioritize your investment and your effort. And of course, so this notion of sort of community wealth building is about, really asking yourself, when a lot, of course, is around procurement. When you procure, who should you be buying from? So I'll give you an example. Sally-Anne, that, we've got this, huge collaboration area, and you sit on the Alliance group that, as I do, and we talk all the time about how we can, improve the collaboration to get these kinds of results out of Sydney. And I was meeting with one of the members once, and they were saying, well, this is what we're doing with our, this is what we're going to be doing with our business, blah, 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 blah. And then they said, and then we're going to do this with, we're going to get this technology and we're going to do this. And then they named a company. And I said, but why would you use them when the precinct is full of people who are doing that work or are evolving that work? To be a member of this precinct, and that's sort of looking at it through that community wealth building lens, wouldn't it be better to use someone who's here and then use that as an opportunity to help them grow and then showcase them as a consequence of them being the provider in your business, right? So that's a lens, a policy lens that, helps to prioritize investment to get that, to help leverage and give that opportunity. I do have another example which I can use later, but that's just, that's a kind of more abstract one, but that's what we mean. So it's back to what you were saying, those policy is important. Obviously, I'm a public servant, and there has to be public policy around this, right? Yeah. Thank you.
I love it. It's really what I think you're talking about. If I abstract one level up, is about the vision. And it's that determination, which I kind of come back to the V2 Foods story of recognizing the opportunity and something's there, but having a determination and a commitment to actually follow that through. Kathy, I know you've done so much work in, pulling together things inside CSIRO, and CSIRO is an amazing organization, but it's a giant beast. Like, let's be real, there's lots going on. What is it that you do? How do you think about, connecting those dots with community and opportunity and, really doing that? Because I do think we don't talk about wealth creation because it seems like a dirty word a little bit, but we are, in bringing these products to market, we're trying to solve the problems, but we're also trying to make them sustainable opportunities for businesses as well. So
absolutely. Well, that's actually something where I think it is a bit of a differentiator, and that is that it's not as though I could go out and create a business, to be honest. It's actually business people who know what they're talking about. So CSIRO has over 100 people whose role it is business development, wealth creation in terms of, or commercialization, and how to turn these things into a business. And it's a different skill set, and you learn. I always say there's nothing worse than bush lawyers who are scientists, but I think it's pretty much the same too in scientific world. It's pretty rare that you have someone who's good at, you know, understanding the full issues because it's a profession. And so one of the things I know that has made a big difference is our commercialization team. So we've got Main Sequence Ventures that is a venture capital, but we also have a commercialization team, which has done things where we've partnered with the university and done some specific extra work, which means that we've put some intellectual property into whatever is being developed. And then they've worked out the right business model. And I think that's the thing that's really critical, is especially as we're going to work towards sustainable industry, things which are enduring, you also have to think about what is the business model that's going to make it work. And, you know, just think about things like Amazon, which, you know, selling books online, which, you know, seemed like when they came on board many years ago, they didn't make money out of selling books. They made money from actually their platform, and also from the fact that when you paid your bill, they then paid their bill 30 days later and invested the money in between times and made their money from investments. And if you go through, you know, just looking at, say, the change in the music market, you know, we went from having everyone going to the CD store or the record store and, you know, plowing our way through, looking at what to buy, and now you just download it from a platform. And it's those sorts of changing in the way, changes in technology that also requires a different business model is absolutely critical. And I suppose one of the things which has been really important from a CSIRO perspective is identifying what is the right sort of business model so that the technology will stick. Because you've got to have not only a technology people need, it also has to have a good user interface. And we've put a lot of effort into social science and usability, because we all know those apps, which in theory should be good and we never use because they're so clunky. That's, you know, that's just as important, not to mention the widgets and things we've probably bought and thrown in the bin. So you've got to have that. You've got to have the business model and the technology, and also the governance settings, so that there's, you know, you're able to work within the constraints of what's necessary, and the social license to do it, of course, comes across all that. And I think one of the things which I've noticed from CSIRO's perspective is, you know, that's where I think we've come, you know, it's not like we knew this all along. We've had to evolve and learn this, and I'm hoping that, well, our learnings can be actually are being packed up more broadly across all the sectors, including universities and other publicly funded agencies, so that we are able to, you know, learn from each other and make sure that everyone realizes that it's not that straightforward to take something from, you know, an invention through to something where there's a business coming out where you do make money and it's sustainable, but also has an impact somehow or other, and, you know, does good things for other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. It is really a really complex life cycle to bring a product to market, and a deep tech even more so, because there's so many failure points along the way, from, you know, in the labs and going from bench, and if you're doing health or med tech, from you go to bench to, you know, trials, it's just multiple failure points. There's this window of opportunity I think we're seeing at the moment in Australia with COVID. All of a sudden the world is hooked on science because they're desperately waiting. We're all waiting for a vaccine. We won't get into talking about the vaccine at the moment, but there's this window of opportunity where all of a sudden I think people are understanding the commercialization journey, because the impatience of waiting for that, going, well, why does it take so long? And, you know, what's the process for? And why does there have to be three levels of clinical trial? And what does that do? And there's a general dialogue that seems to be happening across the community in that one specific area, which I think is a real opportunity for us to kind of have these conversations and broaden it out into other areas. There's a great question that's come through on the Q&A that I just want to kind of paraphrase and throw to both of you. It's about something that the Prime Minister said about, you know, being better tech adopters, which I think, you know, yes, business in Australia definitely needs to be better tech adopters. But I think there's a real opportunity, a missed opportunity, if we just become adopters. You know, the creator piece is the real magic opportunity. And we're seeing that through the CSIRO. We're seeing it in the buildings that are here. We're seeing it with the companies we're going to showcase over the coming weeks with Emerge 2020. What is it that you think that we need to, and I'll throw this to both of you, what do you think we need to do to nurture more creativity so that we are actually building here, and instead of just driving that adoption here? I mean, you've touched on a few things around policy, but what is it that we can generally do? And what is it that people that are watching today, that people that are going to watch in subsequent weeks are going to say, you know, how can I contribute to that? What is it I can do to engage in that? Because it is that creativity, that desire, that drive, that ability to connect and build a business and take an idea to a market is really different. And it's a hard and sometimes lonely road. You know, that's why it's nice to be in a building like this where there's so many other people on the journey with you. But what is it that we need to do collectively, do you think? And I'll throw it over to either one of you that wants to answer.
I have one thought to begin with, and that is that we are a bit of a country of betters, and we like to win, and we don't really like losers. And unfortunately, when you're taking deep tech into the market, there's going to be failures. And I think one thing which we can all embrace is actually realizing that anyone who's failed has learned something, and we should be in awe of them, because they've usually put their own funds into it, so they've lost money, and that they've also really taken that risk. And we should be really proud of the fact they're willing to do that, and be open to supporting them in other ways. So that if you're looking at someone who has started up a business and it hasn't got there, and they've had to close it down, and that happens a lot. As you said, there's lots of failure points, but we need to have that attitude that it isn't failure; it's actually just part of the progress. And I think if there's one thing everyone can do is actually switching their mental frame of saying that someone's not a loser if their business doesn't succeed. They actually just haven't found the right business yet. And it's if you approach it in that way, I think that in itself will change the culture a bit in Australia, because that's probably something that does bring us down in this space.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if I'm quite answering your question, but I really accept what you're saying. It's not about adopting, because we don't want just people adopting and using other people's products, right? We want to be creating products. I mean, it is interesting that, I'm sure you all know the OECD research around this, that Australians work amongst the longest hours, but we are not the most productive. And that's because we are working long hours, but we are not deploying technology enough to get productivity out of those hours. So that's the first thing I'm going to say. So what I'm going to say, I'm going to answer it slightly differently and say that I think what we need to think about are the attributes that you need to have, the kind of attributes and mindset you need to be able to be really good at this. And I think Kathy has spoken about one of them. We have to be allowed to fail, and we have to be okay about failing. And, so that's really important. I think there are a couple of others that I want to talk about. One is that we do need to not be frightened of, and I guess I'm speaking as a public servant. I'm speaking as someone who's, really invested in public policy. I think you do have to understand and have the information, the data and the information about what is going on. So we don't really have enough of that, do we, Sally Ann? I mean, when we go to our meetings, half of us don't even know what the other half is doing, and that's just one small area. So you really need to know, and then you really need to interrogate, as you did with that wonderful Cicada report, interrogate what is it that's making things work and what is not making things work, and not be afraid to intervene to correct those things. I think we know, apart from knowing that Australians work a lot of hours but don't deploy technology well to necessarily be productive, we also know that gender matters. We know that our competitors know and understand that you have to get the gender balance and the diversity if you're going to really be great at this, and the research bears that out, right? And so we know the market will not do that on its own. The very first thing we sponsored when this administration was, elected here, the Lord Mayor Clover Moore's administration, and I started here, the very first thing we sponsored was Springboard, because we wanted to associate ourselves with an organization that helped to redress the balance of support for and venture capital going to women, because we need to have women and we need to have diversity. So that's one of the things. That's another attribute we need to have. Some positive discrimination to make sure we've got the diversity, because the diversity leads to those solutions. And the final thing I'll talk about is governance as competitive advantage, right? And COVID has really borne this out. We have done amazingly well in this country. And it's not just, it's because it is because essentially, despite all of our complaining, we still believe our governments when they tell us something, right? We still trust our financial institutions. We trust our health service. We trust all those major institutions to do the right, to be honest and do the right thing. Governance is a really important competitive advantage, which is why when institutions let us down, like the Banking Royal Commission or, Grants Rorts or whatever, when those institutions let us down, they are letting everyone down. They are letting down our economy. Our good governance means that people will trust our products. They will trust that they have been well designed, that our medical products will be clean, that our food will be safe. These are incredible advantages. And again, we must understand them. We must protect them, because that's what's going to make, because we're never going to compete on scale. We're not that big. We have to compete on quality and those specialist products that we're going to develop.
I love the passion and enthusiasm that you both have for this space and the vision. And I want to just touch on something, when you talked about the sponsorship of Springboard, really, what's behind that is creating a vision for the future that we want to be. So let's switch to be visionary at the moment. Before we get into the questions from the audience, and just a reminder to everybody watching, please pop your questions in and we will try and get to some of those in a moment. But let's be visionary for a moment. If I could give you a crystal ball, and this isn't on your pre-prepared questions, but it's one that I kind of have been thinking about a lot, because we are in this really challenging time, and there's a lot of introspection, I think, happening as a nation. I think it's happening at a global level, and I think people are having it at a personal level and kind of going, what does the future hold? What does it look like for me? And it can be quite doom and gloom, particularly for those who maybe haven't been able to find employment or have lost their jobs, and are really, I don't want to diminish that. It's a really challenging time. But if history shows us anything, out of recessions, out of challenging times, we've seen some of the greatest growths and the greatest innovation leaps. We live and breathe that here. One of our largest residents, SpeedX, who, people will get to meet throughout the Emerge Festival, was born off redundancies for the two female founders in the global financial crisis. So their lab shut down, they were made redundant, and rather than going and finding another job, they took a punt, came in here and started their business, and now doing diagnostics and therapeutics and sending, their test kits that deal with antibiotic resistance as well, go to the largest labs around the world. They manufacture on site. Like, it's this amazing story that no one's ever heard of. Phenomenal company. They've had support from government, both at the federal and at the state level through the Medical Devices Fund, and lots of support from us and the community around them. But those stories don't get told enough about what's happened in the past. And I think as a nation, particularly our younger people and the generation coming through, and I know we're having a lot of students going to be engaging, university students and graduates engaging over the next few weeks. If you can look at your crystal ball 10, 15 years from now, what are the innovations? What are the things that we're going to see that are going to be the opportunities for these people to find employment, to find engagement, to build, to participate in, to invest in? What are those things that you think we're going to see? And it could be broad thematic areas, or it could be very specific things, because I'm hopeful. I'm really hopeful. And I've got some thoughts on that, but...
Well, I guess the first thing is looking at where I'm always thinking where the market's going. And at the moment, there's a real interest in quantum technologies. I think there's some great opportunities there. And we're particularly in the Sydney area, there's this central focus for Australia of quantum, and the state government's invested in the Sydney Quantum Academy, which is bringing together all the Sydney universities to look at what they're doing. And what we're seeing is a spirit of entrepreneurialism coming with that, but there's also whole new supply chains. So that there's still the need for not just people with PhDs, but also people who've got technical skills. And we need to work out what that looks like and make sure we've got, instead of just air conditioning engineers, we have to have cryogenic engineers that can look after stuff that's really, really cold. So that's one area. I think we're also seeing and they will in the initial stages move into defense and health and sensor systems for trying to find or detect things which at the moment we'd love to be able to detect but we can't, and that'll be the first deliverable of those. And then in time, just down the road at University of New South Wales, I think we'll start seeing the silicon quantum computer delivering on its promise, and that'll probably be accessed using a cloud approach, I imagine. And you're already able to access things like the Q Hub down in Melbourne with their IBM computer, quantum computer, which is a sort of a pre-computer. So I think that's going to be really interesting and open up a whole lot of stuff, particularly in the banking industries and anywhere that has large amounts of information. And we're going to start seeing, I think, a whole lot of impact from the digital revolution of how it can really change what we're doing and how we can, as Monica was saying, become more efficient. I think there was a report which was put out by Data 61 a couple of years ago now that said that, you know, there's some hundreds of billions of dollars there for the taking if we were to digitize things and really embrace the whole digital thing, the Internet of Things, and big data and that sort of aspect. I also think that we're really going to see a shift in the way we just do everyday things. So you know, things like medical medical engagement will be really different. So that we're going to see point of care diagnostics mean that we'll be able to have more telemedicine. And we've seen that happen. You know, I think they were talking about telemedicine taking 10 years to introduce, and we did it in a couple of weeks, I think it was. And found that it's fabulous. And again, that was a classic example of, you know, government changing its settings as well as responding to what's there at the time. And I suppose the final thing is I actually think, I mean, there's so many things I could think of, but the other one I think is going to be really interesting is where we're seeing the adoption. And I know it's slowing down a little bit just because of COVID, but I'm really interested to think of where Australia's going to go with its transport. We actually are quite behind compared to other countries in adoption of our own vehicles. So we still have lots of petrol-driven vehicles, and probably most of us can't afford to have an electric one or a Tesla or whatever. But there's also the emergence of hydrogen as a part. Particularly, part of the problem is Australia's got long distances, so electric vehicles aren't necessarily, sort of which are battery operated, aren't necessarily fit for purpose if we're going to do road trips and things. So that's where hydrogen vehicles will possibly come in, and Australia's got a slightly different requirement. So I think the changes in the energy settings are going to be really interesting, and I think hydrogen's going to be quite pervasive. But also along with that, are we going to flip to having not just hydrogen or electric vehicles, but also having driverless vehicles, and that we actually deal with, and this will revolutionize the whole way of thinking. And Monica, for you in particular in the city of Sydney, is suddenly you don't need parking anywhere because you don't own a car. You actually just buy part of a driverless car, which then goes and Ubers itself when you're not needing it, and it goes and picks up people and does things, and then comes and picks you up when it's time to go home. So car parks will be a thing of the past, and it will really change mobility for everyone. It'll take some time because it'll be too expensive, but I actually think that's got the potential. We're talking about 10, 15 years away. I actually think it's going to be massive and open up extraordinary opportunities. And it may be one of those examples of Australia leapfrogging where we've been a bit behind the pickup on battery operated cars because our circumstances are different. And we're going to go straight into sort of, into a whole different regime. So there's that transition period is going to be tricky. So there's some ideas from me.
Love it. That's a future I'm buying into.
I can't wait too. When I lose my license, when I get too old, I want to be having my driver's card.
I want to repurpose all of Monica's parking lots.
Yeah, imagine that. You know, could you imagine if we didn't have parking lots anywhere or stations? Yep.
Amazing.
I think I do have to say though that the issue isn't just parking; it's actually the
Oh,
amount
no.
of road space,
Absolutely.
given the density, and so really we would not be that excited about more cars roaming around because you can't actually fit them on the road. You'll still have congestion. But anyway, it's another matter. If I might just on your question there, and I think you also talked about, Sally Ann, the issue of, how is this communicated and how do we excite people about the fantastic things that are going on? Because I am in no way equipped to give the wonderful examples that Kathy has just given or you've given, because, this is the fabulous work that you do, and it's so interesting to me to hear about all of the wonderful things that are going on. So I'm going to answer it slightly differently and say, what is it? How do we now link this to the community? How do we get a broader community understanding and excitement about it? And so rather than answering the question, what will we see? I'm going to answer the question, what do we need? And I think what we need is hope. And I think if we're wanting to engage with young people, we need to demonstrate to them that there is hope. And that hope, for me, I think has to come has two aspects, that what you're talking about and what your people like you and Kathy are doing can help answer. And that hope is that we will address the climate emergency and that there will be full employment. Right? Because if we don't do both of those things, then we will have failed our community and we will have failed the next generation. And so I think that, it's when we're demonstrating these wonderful innovations, we also have to demonstrate not just the service that people will get out of it, but the opportunity that they will get out of it. That these innovations will solve these wicked problems and they will lead to the next generation of jobs, high value jobs. And again, that for me, that has to be a principle or a part of the policy, which is that it has to lead. We have to have a commitment to employment as a consequence as well. So I think that when we're looking at how we get that engagement, we need to ask what is it that is in the minds of the people whom we're trying to engage with. And it's not just hearing about the great and exciting things that are happening. That's very important. But how does that answer deal with my anxiety about the future? And that anxiety being probably climate and employment.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and it echoes one of the questions that's probably been voted up the most is about employment and, the challenge that it is. And we do know that we have, PhD and masters and we have graduates out there, and we have people who haven't gone through the tertiary education system. They may have gone through VET or they're school leavers who are worried about that. Our unemployment levels are going up. Unfortunately, the RBA governor did say the other day that that's projected to go up further in the next year or two before we, see these opportunities become available as we start to see this sort of innovation challenge rise and open the doors. But, in speaking about hope and what we do about that, is there anything, and this is unscripted, but is there anything that we can point people to? We're obviously running Emerge with the City of Sydney. We're trying to point people to the opportunities. We're trying to connect the dots and create that conversation. But do either of you have any other suggestions that we have of how we can actually connect young people to some of the hope? Are there other resources out there and things that we can direct them to that will give them that opportunity and connection?
So there's one thing which is really interesting is the meetup events, because a lot of job finding is about your networks. And I think that's something which I only learnt late in life, but even though I unconsciously got, like, even my first job in CSIRO 36 years ago was actually as a consequence of the network I had formed because I was a student. I went to a local conference. I met the people at CSIRO. I did a bit of a collaboration with them. And when I applied for a job, back then they were advertising in the newspaper, but when I applied for a job, they knew me and they knew what I was capable of. And so therefore I got the job. And I think the importance of networking and reaching out to to opportunities is something it can make a big difference. And I know that around events that you're running like this event itself is a good example. And I know at COVID it's being a bit tricky, but I'll give another example. Is around Macquarie University, they've got the Venture Cafe, and that's every Thursday from 3 o'clock onwards. Just type in Venture Cafe and they'll have events which are free. Some of them are online now, and they've got the most amazing virtual little meeting rooms and stuff. It's actually quite fun, and you meet all these people by the way they set up their breakout sessions. Sort of cute the way they've done. It's like being part of a computer game. But it's but the thing that's really interesting is that that's where you meet other people like startups, because most jobs aren't advertised. Most jobs are filled by people knowing people and making personal recommendations. So you've got to go around knocking on doors. The other is also, I saw in the questions, sort of PhD graduate, how do I find a job in industry? Sometimes you actually have to go and sell yourself by going and saying, where's a company I really want to work for? And go and sell what you can offer them, because often we're the land of SMEs. I think people are probably sick of me saying this number, but it's 97% of our businesses are SMEs, and of them 70% have less than 20 people. So most of them have no idea that research and someone with a PhD will pay for themselves several times over and really help their business to flourish. And so you've got to go and do a bit of homework, find out where the businesses are, talk to people, and go knocking on doors to, and it is a bit of shoe leather. It's actually a full-time job, actually finding a job, which is, I think, often not recognised, that it's, you've got to put a lot of elbow grease into it. And also reach out to ask for people for introductions. Every time you meet anyone, if they give you your business card, that gives you a permission to make contact with them again. When you're in a webinar and because we don't pass business cards around, look at who are, ask, for example, after this one, for Cicada to provide you the contact details and email introduction to someone you want to follow up with, because people like me can do introductions to others. And for us, what is the want of a quick email can be a life-changing situation in the COVID world. Or if you're at a conference or something, you actually introduce people and pass that on. And it's I think that's sort of changing that mentality a little bit of looking for a job as opposed to finding that job and putting yourself forward is a bit different. A lot of researchers have, don't think in those terms, but I think this is part of the new world where businesses don't necessarily know that innovation can make a difference for them. If you think you've got something to sell to a company in terms of you as a product, value your knowledge and your ability and sell that, you'll be surprised. And the other is also, just many businesses don't know where the front door of any research organisation is, and so therefore they don't even know that they can contact it. That there's a whole lot of incentives and government grants and things that. So that's the other one, is finding out what government support there is. So when you go knocking on that door, you say, "And I bring with me the potential for you to apply for all this support funding." It's co-invested, but it's still a really good way of leading to a better business outcome. And I think it's just joining in and being part of that sector, finding out where the action is happening, and go and turn up.
My gosh,
sorry. Can I just add to that? Oh, sorry.
Please. I was just going to say one thing though, Monica. I was like, that's the life advice I needed as a graduate.
Yes, exactly.
So, thank you.
Exactly. So I'm just going to build on that. But I think, the question is, how does this convert into jobs? Well, it converts into jobs when the innovation gets converted into manufacturing, into making stuff that creates jobs, right? So it's not the only thing, but that's one of them. That's one of the answers, right? Is you can't just make the stuff and then turn it into stuff that we make. But I just want to again put this into some kind of policy context here, which is that the greatest mistake we can make in this country, and we're already making it, and we have to deal with it, is to allow the gap between rich and poor to grow. And when you look at what's happening at the United States, I mean, that is what happens. That is what happens when you allow that gap between rich and poor to grow. and it is the greatest destabilizer to economy. And once you to democracy, and once you destabilize democracy, you destabilize investment. So it is in all of our interests, not just from a social justice point of view. It is absolutely imperative from a social justice point of view that we demand employment policy that leads to full and proper employment. But it also is the foundation for good governance, for a solid democracy, and those are again, when I said the attributes for investment, right? And so that's, we have to do that. And one of the ways we can use this fantastic work and these fantastic things that, you know, you and Sally and Sally Ann and Kathy are working on is to, you know, then is for us all to work really hard to see this research and these ideas converted into things that create jobs. And I'll just finish with, we also need to really fix the vocational education sector, because you need the whole spectrum, right? And I saw it, I mean, there was a show on 7:30 Report the other day, and it was just so damning, because it showed a business, and they had their apprentice, and they were showing what the technology that the apprentice had to be able to use to do a trade, right? And then they showed the TAFE workshop where the tools were 10 years old. They were using tools, right? Nothing like the technology that tradesperson needed to use into the future. And of course, gender as well. We want to see women in those vocational areas as well. So this is where it's all about, vision. What do we want for our society? Employment, proper jobs, tenure, high value jobs, a future for our young people, fixing the wicked problems, but knowing the whole spectrum from the researcher through to the tradesperson that then is able to fix that product or maintain that new product.
I think you raised something really interesting, and you're seeing furious nods from both Kathy and I. So I think we're all in agreement of that. What's been the most fascinating thing to see under the hood of Cicada, and it was certainly true in my Google days, but I live and breathe it and see examples of it every single day, is good ideas can come from anywhere. And I think we have this mythology that they are born in the research labs of universities and CSIRO exclusively. There's amazing ideas that are born there.
That's actually, in fact, I find many of our great ideas come from our technical staff and also our customers, and also the general public. The number of times I've got good ideas standing on the edge of the football field when my kids were doing Saturday sport was surprising, where you just, you have that sort of social situation where you just, people ask, what do you do? And then they say, oh, I do this. And then you say, oh, and then suddenly, I don't know, they come up with a great idea. You think, oh my gosh, you just solved a big problem for me. That is not an uncommon event.
And I love that. And I think that speaks to the diversity that, and making sure that everybody has access to this conversation and everybody is included in the journey, not from just a jobs perspective, but a creation perspective as well. We've met farmers who are 60 plus years of age and have invented the most amazing things on farm out of necessity, because they couldn't find an off-the-shelf solution for the problem they're facing. And they come to us in such a humble manner going, is there anything in this? And it's quite incredible. And you see it from all walks of life. So I think, I'm conscious of time and we're wrapping up, but I really like where this is going, because I do think we need to break down the silos between disciplines, between industry, between community, between research, between academia, to really kind of get these great ideas and these great opportunities come together. I guess final sort of question to both of you and thoughts is, what is it that we can do to break down those silos? Or what would you like to add into that conversation? Because I do think that's where, Kathy, to your point, I've had those conversations where you're sitting having a cafe. I go to my barista just across the street, and we'll sit and have a coffee, and he'll say something to me that is the most profound thing, and he'll have no idea what he's just said, and how it's impacted another piece of what I'm thinking. So what is it we can do to foster this and make sure that we're not leaving anybody behind or leaving anybody out?
Oh, that's That's actually one of the things I want to focus on when I'm, Australia's chief scientist, because we are siloed, and I think that's what's holding us back. Some of them are structural, like for me to move from one to move even into industry, or even move to another government department, you'd think I was, going to another planet. So we've got a lot of structural things that. So as much as our superannuation system is fantastic and our entitlements are fantastic, and they've been hard fought for to make sure that we're safe and supported at work, they also create a little bit of a difficulty when and how we manage that. So I think there's some structural things from the way we set up, the way we work, and how we can move between different organisations is one. The other is also what does good look like, and how we measure good is, or excellence is quite varied depending on where you're coming from. So from university academics, if you want to be in the university system, you've got to have a stellar publication record and win prizes and things like that. Well, when industry, and even in CSIRO, they're not very important. They're just indicators that hopefully that what you came up with is correct, and so therefore we can trust it. So different recognition of different metrics, and what is good and what is recognised and measured as successful, and therefore promoted or whatever or successful in getting grants. That, I think, at the moment is too narrow. And I think recognition and understanding of what it means, if you're someone in industry, if you then go to apply for an academic role where there'd be great advantage of getting more industry engagement there, they're not competitive. And that's the same with women too, or people from a whole range of different diverse backgrounds will have a different idea of what good looks like. So I think we need to broaden that. And then I guess the other is arrogance. I think making sure that we don't think that just because I've got a PhD in physics, that makes me better than someone who has a TAFE certificate in, say, electronics, because what they do, I would have no hope in heaven of doing. And it's horses for courses. And I think that we do tend to have a level of arrogance and sometimes and entitlement when you've had the privilege of super education like I've had, coming from a background of my parents were professionals, and I've never had to worry about domestic violence, or I've never been hungry. I've always had a job. I've been healthy. And so even though I'm female, that's about my only disadvantage. So, lucky me, and it's a good thing that I've been able to succeed in the world, but there's a good reason why I have, because I've had extraordinary privilege. And I think that we often don't realise, those who have privilege, how difficult it is when you don't have that. And we need to work out how we can. I absolutely agree with Monica about that difference between rich and poor. Even in Sydney, east versus west in the Greater Sydney area, north and south. I think we need to really embrace that that recognition that humble collaboration is the best way forward.
So, and in the interest of time, I'm just going to say one thing, and that is, firstly, Kathy, if you're going to be working on breaking down silos, I'd love to help you. I just came before this webinar. We were actually having our managers conference, and we were going through the Pulse survey that we'd recently done in the organisation, and interrogating that. And one of the issues that comes up and always comes up is collaboration. And I was asking, we were asking ourselves, we use this word collaboration, but what do we really mean? And I think I'm just going to say that, what we sort of talked about this morning is that, collaboration is not a thing you do, it's your mindset. And if we're going to, we have to change the mindset so that our way of behaving is a collaborative way. So that human inquiry, sense of inquiry and wonder is really invested in and supported, and it just becomes the way we are, so that we we break those barriers down just through the way we behave, the way we think, the way that we operate. Thank you.
I could not have ended on a better note from both of you. I will humbly collaborate with both of you on all of the goals and objectives that you want to achieve, particularly that last one, Kathy. So I think you've got two willing participants to your agenda as chief scientist here, and supporters, and many more actually I see on the chat. Look, we are out of time. I do want to really thank you, Kathy, thank you, Monica, thank you for the generosity of your time. Thank you for your shared wisdom and perspectives. I know I have got a lot out of it. I'm actually feeling quite encouraged. And also on that last note in particular, and that last sort of conversation we've just had, personally feeling very uplifted and supported. And it is, I think you're 100% right. And I'm really excited to see what 2021 brings for both of you individually, but all of us collectively as we do collaborate together for that shared future and vision for Australia. So thank you very much. I know if everybody was here, you could have a round of applause of people watching that would celebrate you more. There's lots of people in the chat saying collaboration, collaboration, many willing participants, we're all in. So I feel like if you need a little army, you've got one.
Sounds like it. Fantastic. Thanks everyone. I'll need all your help.
Which is just wonderful. So thank you so much. Thank you to everybody for joining us online today for the kickoff of Emerge 2020. Thank you for the City of Sydney for the support that we get to run this each year. We are truly excited about it. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye for now.